Sup, fuckers? So you're probably wondering right now, hey jackass, didn't you say you were gonna make more archetype videos? Well, don't worry. I got a couple more videos in the works right now, but I decided I was gonna make a slight detour. See, my ultimate goal with those videos is to help both new and returning players get into the game. But I ran into a slight oversight. What's the point of analyzing archetypes for you noobs if you don't even know how to play the damn game? And that's why we're here today. I'm gonna teach you cunts how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Because not only does it cover my ass by giving me something to link off to in future videos, but it ultimately helps me achieve my goal by getting people into a game that I've loved so much ever since I was a wee little undead piece of shit. Now, a quick forewarning before we get into the nitty gritty here. This game is not for the faint of heart. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a notoriously hard game to get into. And trust me, Konami does not seem to make this shit any easier. I could easily make this into a 12-hour long Darva video where I spend half an hour going over the intricacies of Bistro Butcher or some shit, and I still wouldn't have enough time to go over every little fucking interaction that goes into this game. There's only so much time in a day, and I ultimately believe that the information is easier to retain if I make these into bite-sized videos instead of trying to cram 25 years of game knowledge into a 3-hour long video. So if you want to be a sexual Tyrannosaurus, just like me, then let's get this bread. We're going to break this series off into a bunch of chapters up in the ante in general game sense as we go. Now a disclaimer. I am not some Yu-Gi-Oh god, nor will I ever claim to be one. I'm just some fucking cunt who's played this game for a while and has a general understanding of how to play it. My hope is that when this is all said and done, I will turn all you fucking casuals into fearsome duelists capable of holding your own. So let's start things off simple and go over the basics. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a card game where both players play with a deck ranging from 40 to 60 cards called the main deck, as well as a separate deck that can have up to 15 cards in it called the extra deck. Each player starts the game with 8,000 life points and by drawing 5 cards from their main deck. You start your turn by drawing 1 card unless you're going first. The game is won when either a player's life points drop to 0, an alternate win condition like Exodia is met, or if a player runs out of cards to draw from their deck at the start of their turn. Now, already I'm aware that this is a lot for you casuals to take in, but don't start scrolling TikTok brain rot just yet. I'll go over the phases of a turn in a little bit, but for now we're going to go over the zones. There's 14 zones on the field. 5 zones for your spell and trap cards called the back row. 5 monster zones where you'll be doing most of your summoning for your monsters. A field card zone for your field spells, which depending on what you play will be either totally necessary or completely worthless. Finally, there's the extra monster zone, which you'll be using to summon monsters out of your extra deck. Both players can only have 1 monster in the extra monster zone at all times. Alright, so if I didn't just make you spontaneously combust from the fat fucking knowledge I just dropped on you, then we can move on to the graveyard and banishing cards. So after a card is removed from the field, it gets sent to the graveyard, which over the years the community has lovingly named this place the second hand. And that is because a lot, and I mean a lot, of cards have graveyard effects, which often require you to banish them for cost. And this is where banishing comes into play, because once a card gets banished, it becomes much harder to get it back. And if for some reason a card of yours ever gets banished face down, you might as well kiss it goodbye because you're not getting that thing back. However, certain cards also have effects upon being banished too, which means depending on what you play, you might actually prefer to banish your cards instead of sending them to the grave. Now, in case you haven't caught on yet, I'm going to spell it out for you. Pretty much everything in this game, and I mean fucking everything, is contextual. Some decks will try to utilize their graveyard as much as possible. Other decks will say, fuck this shit, and just try to banish everything instead. See, the golden rule of Yu-Gi-Oh! That you should always follow is to always read what the card says. Which, granted, is a lot easier said than done when half these cards have some college kid's final exams thesis written on the fucking text. See, this is what I meant when I said this game is not for the faint of heart. I'm aware that this is quite a bit to take in, and I haven't even went over the phases of a turn yet. And you damn boomers tried to make fun of Kaiba for making a duel academy in the anime. Well, look who's laughing now, Gramps. But don't shit your diapers just yet, boomers, because now I'm going to go over the phases of a turn. First, we got the draw phase, which, like I said before, you draw one card from your main deck unless you're the person who goes first. After the first turn, both players will just draw one card during the start of their draw phase normally. Next, we got the standby phase, which is mostly used to activate certain cards and pay for the cost of others. Afterwards, we move to the main phase, and this is where the real meat and potatoes of Yu-Gi-Oh! Will take place most of the time, since this is where most of your turn is going to take place in. Many cards will have a written clause on them in which they can only activate their effects during the main phase. And now we'll move on to the battle phase. During the battle phase, the turn player will attack with all their monsters in an attempt to bring the opponent's life points down to 0. If 2 attack position monsters battle, then the monster with lower attack is destroyed and the difference is dealt as life point damage. If both monsters have the exact same amount of attack, then both monsters get destroyed and neither player takes damage. If an attack position monster battles a defense position monster, then if the monster has lower defense, it gets destroyed and the defending player takes no damage. However, if the monster's defense is higher than the attack of the monster, then the attacking player takes damage and neither monster gets destroyed. There's also a hidden phase within a phase called the damage step. This is when 2 monsters initiate battle, but before the damage calculation of the battle occurs. Certain cards have effects that can only be triggered during this particular little phase of the turn. But wait, there's more, because like a bad B movie, we have a sequel to the main phase called the main phase 2. Here you can make any sort of last minute plays you need to make before your turn ends. Me personally, this is when I'll be setting all my spells and traps that I'll be using against my opponent for the next turn. However, you are free to make whatever sort of last minute summons you want to make during this phase too. Just keep in mind, if you normal summon in main phase 1, you are not able to normal summon again in main phase 2. And also keep in mind, if you changed a monster's battle position in main phase 1, or you used it to attack that turn, you are not able to change its position again during main phase 2. Finally, we have the end phase, which is kind of like the standby phase, where it's mostly used to activate certain cards' effects and pay for their costs. Now, I've barely even scratched the surface of this onion, because like ogres, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has layers. Let's go over the main types of cards you'll be using next. There's 3 main deck card types: monsters, spells, and traps. Monsters are the bread and butter of Yu-Gi-Oh! Each monster has a level ranging from 1 to 12, and can be one of 6 attributes: fire, water, wind, earth, dark, and light, as well as the type plus their attack and their defense stats. But Hollow, what about divine monster? Shut the fuck up, we don't talk about them. You can normal summon a monster once per turn with no limit to how many times you can special summon a monster every turn. Monsters level 4 and lower can be normal summoned without any stipulations. Monsters level 5 and 6 require you to sacrifice 1 monster you control in the field, and this is called a tribute summon. And monsters level 7 and higher require 2 monsters for tribute. Note that a tribute summon counts as your normal summon. Also note that monsters can only be normal summoned in attack mode. If you want to normal summon a monster in defense mode, you have to set it on its side and play it face down, and this is called a normal set. If you special summon a monster though, you can special summon it in either attack mode or defense mode. One last thing before moving on here, all monsters summoned cannot change their positions during that turn they are summoned. Okay, let's move over to the spells now. Spells are cards you can play at any time during your turn, and there's generally not a limit to how many spells you can play per turn. Unless the card says once per turn, of course, but that's like every card in the fucking game, so. Anyways, finally, we have trap cards. These are, generally speaking, a bit more powerful than spells, but the trade-off is you have to set them before you play them, and they cannot be activated the turn they are set either. Before moving on, I want to quickly mention field spells, quick play spells, and counter traps. Field spells have their own little designated zone that I mentioned earlier and are usually archetype specific, so not every deck you play is going to run one. Field spells are signified by this little star icon. Quick play spells have similar functionality to traps, where you can either play them during your turn or play them during the opponent's turn by setting it face down, although if you set them face down you won't be able to activate them the turn they're set. And quick play spells are signified by this little Harry Potter looking ass lightning bolt. Rounding off with counter traps, which are signified by this little arrow and can only be responded to with another counter trap. Everybody got that? Good, because now we're going to round over to the extra deck monsters. There's 4 types of extra deck monsters: fusions, synchros, XYZ monsters, and link monsters. Fusions are the oldest type and generally require 2 different monsters to get them out, as well as a spell card called polymerization. However, a lot of fusion-heavy archetypes have their own specific branded form of fuckery to get them online. I should also mention that some fusion monsters can be cheated out through a thing called contact fusion. This is when you get all the monsters required for the fusion out onto the field and then get rid of them instead of using a fusion spell. A perfect example here is ABC Dragon Buster. This requires you to get A Assault Core, B Buster Drake, and C Crush Wyvern all out on the field at the same time. Then, instead of using the fusion spell, you banish all three of those monsters at the same time in order to get the Dragon Buster out. Gladiator Beasts is another example of a contact fusion heavy archetype. However, these monsters will shuffle themselves into the deck instead of banishing them, so just note that not every contact fusion looks the same. Next, we have my personal favorite, Synchro Monsters. These require a tuner and a non-tuner monster on the field in order to get them out. A tuner is a monster that has tuner written next to its type. And the monsters that you use for a synchro summon have to combine to the exact level of the monster you're trying to get out. So, for example, if your monster's combined levels equal 6, you can only synchro summon a level 6 monster. Next, we have XYZ monsters, which are referred to by the community as XZ for short, and are probably the simplest of all the types to understand. XZ monsters have a rank ranging from 1 to 12. All you need to do to get them out on the field is to summon 2 monsters at the same level as each other and then overlay them together. XZ monsters have pretty powerful effects, but are balanced by the fact that you'll have to detach one of their materials to activate them, meaning eventually you'll run out of materials. Finally, we have Link monsters, which all come with a level ranging from 1 to 6, as well as a series of arrows that are unique to every Link monster. A monster's Link level shows how many monsters you need on the field in order to get the Link monster out. So, for example, a Link 2 monster requires 2 monsters on the field in order to be Link summoned. Then, you can summon another monster and use that plus the Link 2 in order to get into a Link 3 monster, and this is referred to as Link climbing. Link monsters are generally speaking a bit more lenient on their requirements, but are balanced out by the fact you need to either summon it to an extra monster zone or to one of the aforementioned Link arrows. Fuck! Okay, buckle up, Buttercup. We gotta go over pendulums now. These cards act as a 2-for-1 because they can be either a monster or a spell card depending on where you place them on the field. If you want to place a pendulum monster as a spell card, then you have to place it on the edges of your back row. Each pendulum monster also comes with an additional number ranging from 0 to 13, and this is called the pendulum scale. If you place 2 monsters on opposite ends of your back row with different scales, you can do what is called a pendulum summon. So for example, say you have 2 pendulum monsters with a scale 1 and scale 8. You can now pendulum summon all monsters ranging from level 2 to 7. You can pendulum summon as many monsters from your hand as you want, but you can only pendulum summon once per turn. I should also mention that when these special snowflakes are removed from the field, they go face up into your extra deck zone instead of being sent to the grave. You can pendulum summon these monsters back to either the extra monster zone or to one of your arrows that a Link monster points to. But the same restrictions from before still apply. Well, that seems simple enough, right? You might be asking yourself right now, hey Hollow, why do you keep mentioning how hard this game is? Well, throw everything I just said out the fucking window because hand traps exist, fuckboy. Hand trap is any card that can be sent from your hand to the grave in order to interrupt an opponent's plays. And is also something that the Yu-Gi boomers love to complain about whenever they talk about when Yu-Gi-Oh went downhill. However, hand traps have been around since the good old days, with fucking Karibo being able to halt an opponent's attack. However, these days there's 2 hand traps that you'll most commonly see out in the wild. The first is Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, a monster whose card art makes me feel like I should be on a watch list just for looking at this damn thing, and can also go 1-for-1 with your opponent whenever they try to search or do any sort of card draw. The other is the much more badass looking Infinite Impermanence, a trap card that can be played from your hand if you control no cards in order to negate a monster's effect for that turn. Or you can set it as a trap card and then play it during your opponent's turn to do the same thing, but now you negate the entire column that it was played in for that turn as well, meaning that it negates any spell and trap that your opponent was stupid enough to play in that column during their turn. There's also a million different other hand traps that go around a revolving door depending on what you play and what the meta is. But these are the 2 hand traps that you'll be playing around the most and should get comfortable with first. Well, hey, jerky boy, you keep talking about negates. What are those? Negates are effects that hard stop your opponent's plays in some way. There's 5 different types of negates. monster negates, spell and trap negates, summon negates, and omni negates. Now, monster spell and trap negates are fairly self-explanatory. Summon negates just straight up negate and remove a monster upon its summon, meaning that your opponent doesn't even get the chance to activate any of its on-field effects. Finally, omni negates are cards that combine any sort of these into one package. For example, Solemn Judgment is a counter trap which can either negate a summon or a spell or trap for the cost of half your life points. And while there's many different forms of interaction you'll have to learn how to play around, such as board breaking, recursion, floodgates, and the like, negates are arguably the most important aspect of the game to learn how to play around, as often a deck's strength will be judged by the community at large based on how many times it can get halted in its tracks and keep going. So if your deck loses to a single Ash or Imperm, then chances are it's just kind of ass. But if you can take multiple of those bitches and still keep going, then it's a different story. And I'm sure by now the word negate is probably the equivalent of a flashbang to your eardrums, and I'm getting tired of saying this fucking word, so we're gonna move on now. Now, this video is starting to get a little long, and my patience on staving off working on the next video is starting to wear thinner than my non-existent sanity. Let's start wrapping things up now, shall we? So that I can please the voices in my head that tell me that making Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos of all things is somehow a good idea. I'm going to go over two more things real quickly before we wrap this up, and we're going to start with Board Breakers. These are cards that remove a portion of your opponent's hard work on their board in one fell swoop, and they come in many different shapes and sizes. We have stuff like Harpy's Feather Duster, which pops your opponent's entire back row, Twin Twisters, which allows you to discard one card to pop 2 back row, Raigeki, which allows you to destroy all monsters your opponent controls, Lightning Storm allows you to choose between either destroying all attack position monsters that your opponent controls or popping their whole back row. But you must control no face-up cards, and you can only activate 1 per turn. There's also more unorthodox stuff like Kaijus and Lava Golem, which allow you to tribute monsters your opponent controls in order to special summon them to their field, making this a cheeky way to get rid of monsters that would otherwise be impossible to get over. There's a million different other board breakers in the game, but these are just the most commonly used examples. And finally, we have Floodgates. These are cards that shut down a certain aspect of play. The most infamous and feared of them all is Skill Drain. This is a continuous trap that, for the measly cost of 1,000 life points, you can negate all monster effects on the field. Now, a quick note here, most floodgates come in the form of continuous spell and trap cards. However, certain monsters will also have a floodgate attached to them as well. We got a couple examples here, the first being Jinzo, a level 6 monster which negates all traps on the field and prevents them from being flipped face up. The other is Thunder Dragon Colossus, a level 8 fusion monster which prevents your opponent from adding any card to their hand outside of hard drawing it. These are just a few examples because I don't want to break your little brain any more than I already have. And I think that about wraps up the video. Now, I have barely scratched the surface on how this game plays. There's a bunch of other stuff I didn't go over in today's video, such as spell speeds, hard versus soft once per turns, missed timing. Yeah, that's a fucking thing, by the way. Welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh, bitch. And just a bunch of other stuff that I'm not really able to go into right now unless this video becomes 3 hours long. So if you like the video, please consider doing the YouTube things. Or don't. I really don't care. You know why? Because I do this for the love of the game! Anyways, I'll go over some more advanced stuff in the future, and if for some reason you're masochistic enough to find interest in this game and want to get started, well, I think I got an archetype that you just might like. Stay cool, fuckers. Son of a bitch, I forgot to talk about ritual monsters, didn't I? Well, it's a good thing nobody cares about them. Why you got a gun pointed at my face?